So I think anyone that believed that Izaku was gonna walk out of this arc like he was gonna be A-okay, just got all those hopes and dreams just completely squashed, because seeing what Izaku said at the end of the chapter pretty much lets us know that his left arm is so damaged that he's probably not going to be able to use it unless he either unlocks a regenerative type quirk that's a part of One for All, or if Eri heals him. And I'll get back into this in a moment later on in this video. But the point is that Izaku, at this point, I think his left arm is done for. And most likely his right arm is done for as well, because he is definitely going in with 100% on his right arm. I mean, he practically said it at the end of the chapter. He's like, I gotta give this my all no matter what happens. I gotta go in. This ends now. I gotta finish this fight here and now, all or nothing. That's basically what Izaku said at the end of the chapter. So if we put this in perspective, I think by the time this fight finishes, even though it's very clear that Izaku is not going to die here, and Shigaraki's probably not going to be captured because Gigan is coming, and most likely Shigaraki's going to get out of here, it doesn't change the fact, though, most likely both of these individuals, Shigaraki and Izaku, are going to be so damaged that they're going to be the equivalent to what happened with All Might and All for One. We got to remember how that fight was a long time ago. Remember when All Might walked in that fight, and also All for One walked in that fight, they were both not really at their prime anymore. They were both very broken. I mean, All Might literally couldn't use the full capabilities of his power. He had a timer, and he was also used in like little vestiges, little embers of what One for All was, since he gave it up to Izaku. Then you also have, All for One. He was using a bootleg quirk of what really was his original quirk, but on top of that, he was also very damaged, and he didn't have the full capabilities of all his quirks. So both came into that fight against each other very handicapped, very wounded, and most likely what is going on here is the starter to what's probably going to be a repeat of what happened in the past. Izaku and Shigaraki both being heavily damaged to where maybe they might not even be able to go into the next fight when they finally go against each other with 100% anymore, because of just how badly wrecked their body is. But okay, let's back up for a second. So let's actually talk about the character development we got within this chapter. We have known for a very long time now that Bakugo has been going through some insane character development. We've known that he is definitely, became a little bit more of a rival and a better person since his fight with Izaku a long time ago, and he's kind of accepted his weakness. He used to bully Izaku because he didn't want to look at his own weakness, and he finally accepted it, and, he's finally getting along with Izaku on this journey. And this chapter kind of puts it in perspective about Bakugo and kind of how he views Izaku, because even though we can kind of guess how Bakugo views Izaku, and we've seen examples and little foreshadowing and hints here and there that Bakugo obviously does care about Izaku, we never really got to see truly what Bakugo thinks, or what he actually feels about the situation, how he really does feel about Izaku at this point, and we finally got that. And I truly appreciate Horikoshi going out of his way and actually giving us the much needed Bakugo character development / growth, and just seeing kind of where he stands right now as a character. So to kind of dive into it with a little bit more detail, basically, he is someone that wants to keep Izaku at arm's length. Not just because he is a rival and he wants to be better than Izaku, but he wants to keep Izaku at arm's length because he doesn't really factor himself at all into any given situation. And what this means is something that the community of My Hero Academia has known for a very long time. Izaku is a madman. He literally will snap his bones like paper mache, not give a crap about what happens to him, just to be able to fight and bring down someone that he needs to. I mean, he did go through development with Muscular, he learned his lesson with his arms, but obviously Izaku's willing to set stuff like this aside if it matters to the grand scheme of things, for the bigger picture. For instance, taking down Shigaraki, what technically his destiny is, taking down Shigaraki, since he is, All for One, and, Izaku is One for All. And Izaku's always set aside his own self. He never really has factored himself, really, his health and everything, into the big picture. He always focuses on saving the world, saving people, but never worrying about himself. And Bakugo obviously has become very aware of this. He has realized how destructive Izaku is with his own body, and he is now even more fearful because now that he he has so much power, he has, one for all, he's unlocking so many quirks, that it makes it to where there can be one little repercussion, and his body might just snap in half, and he's worried about that, so he wants to keep Izaku in arm's length, not just to beat him, but to keep him safe. And so you can kind of see that Bakugo's objective of being the number one hero is kind of shifted a little bit, honestly. We get a little bit more perspective that most likely the reason why Bakugo wants to be the number one hero is no longer just to be, let's say, the best or be the strongest or whatever, or always winning. He actually wants to be able to, make it to where Izaku isn't number one for he can protect him. Because if Izaku is number one, he's just going to slowly break himself and, wear himself down to where he's even worse than maybe what happened to All Might. And he doesn't want that to happen. He doesn't want Izaku to basically become exactly what All Might is or was. And that is a problem that Bakugo sees, so he's trying to protect Izaku, and he realizes in this chapter when he's screaming at Izaku, like, you need to get away, Eraser's not activated no more, you don't need to be fighting him, he's after, what you have, one for all, you need to get away. Bakugo realizes that he wants to do that, but there's nothing he can do. He does not currently have the power to step into that fight and be able to stand before Shigaraki and get in between Izaku and him. There's just no way, and that is the sad part about this chapter. Bakugo realizes that there is nothing he can do, and he realizes whatever's about to happen is going to be something so bad that it's going to have a permanent change to whatever happens to Izaku. But okay, so it's just interesting character development. I really like Bakugo's character development and how Horikoshi finally dived into that. I know many might not care too much about Bakugo's character development, because I know there is a large part of the community that either says that Bakugo is just annoying, or they just outright hate him, and I understand that thought process. I mean, when you look at Bakugo's origin, and you see where he was, yes, he is a despicable scumbag at the beginning of the story, but obviously, thanks to his development and toning himself down, and kind of been put in his place and realize where he stands, his weakness, etc., he's become a lot more tolerable. He's become definitely an enjoyable character, and I have definitely really warmed up to Bakugo thanks to that. I now see why so many do like him, and I'm a big fan of him as well now. And seeing his character growth even within this chapter makes me appreciate all these little subtle moments we got with him throughout all these chapters since his growth started. I appreciate it. And so, just shout out to Horikoshi for fantastic character development with Bakugo, and getting to see how Bakugo is going down a new path, a new way to try to help out Izaku, and not turn out maybe exactly like what Endeavor was, which that gets into the next part. Endeavor and All Might's, I guess, way to view and analyze people. See, when we look at All Might, when we first were introduced to him, we know he's powerful, we know he was the number one hero, we know that he was the user of One for All, etc. And when you look at his character, you never would pick him as someone like, or take him as someone that would be aware of certain things around him. For instance, aware of what Endeavor was going through, or aware of maybe Bakugo and stuff he's going through. You would never really take, All Might for that. And the reason why is because for a very long time now, I think many, or at least myself, I was always under the impression that All Might was very similar to Izaku. For instance, All Might was someone that was just, he was aware of people, he wanted to keep them safe, but he didn't really understand certain emotions maybe they were going through, some problems they were going through. For instance, maybe what Endeavor was going through, and maybe All Might never understood the pressure that he was causing Endeavor, or what Endeavor was doing throughout his journey to seek power to be able to surpass the number one hero. But it's clear that All Might is kind of aware. He is aware of what Endeavor was, or who he was, or his weakness, and what he was striving to do, and he realizes what Endeavor has been going through. It's kind of interesting to see that All Might has been very aware of certain things around him, especially like Endeavor, or, the situation with Bakugo and all that, and, even factoring in the stuff with Izaku, saying, like, he doesn't really take himself into, account with anything. It's interesting. Maybe All Might's doing some self-reflecting, honestly, when he says the taking account in his own being, but I do think that it shows that All Might is very... He is aware of certain things around him. He is aware of certain people's, issues that they go through. For instance, Endeavor, a good key point. And I just like how All Might was aware of that, and what really started, Endeavor's chain reaction to be where he's at is thanks to All Might basically, having to step down, and, Endeavor realizing he's a weakened individual that really can't do anything anymore. It caused Endeavor to finally, instead of looking at everything around him, to actually look within himself and what he's been doing this entire time. It's just such a beautiful chapter to give a lot of closure to certain things that have been building up for a long time. Now, okay, let's also talk about the stuff that was, with the vestiges, with One For All and the other users. So Bakugo talks about something that is very interesting, and it makes me really curious, and I think many in the community are going to be very curious as well. Bakugo's like, you went in detail to talk about the 5th, 6th, and 7th user, etc., and even the details of their death. But when it came to the 4th user, you scribbled things out, and you really didn't give much information. You didn't really say anything whatsoever about the 4th user, and it feels like you half-finished the details on it, which is very strange. And that is very strange, because obviously All Might doesn't want Izaku to get hurt, and he wants to make sure Izaku's prepared. I mean, if we look at his reasoning within the chapter, he even says that he doesn't want another explosive outburst like what happened with Black Whip, so he was prepping Izaku for one day eventually getting Float as a quirk, which is why he was having Izaku work with, the others, for instance, Ochiko, to learn how to maneuver in mid-air. More into that in a moment, but basically, All Might does want to protect Izaku, so him withholding information on the 4th, that's a big question mark. Why is All Might withholding information? What could be the reason? And we got to look at kind of the dialogue, what All Might said. He said that not only villains seek power, the wicked seek power, which makes me believe that that old theory of maybe one of the vestiges, one of the original users of One For All, might have either been a villain or an anti-hero to some degree. I mean, think about this. I mean, we know that being a user of One For All doesn't necessarily mean that you always have to be a hero or always on the complete side of good. Maybe the 4th user in his own way became very corrupted by, One For All and sought more power, which might be the reason to why One For All is like it is now. Why One For All has so much power and so much stockpile power is probably maybe because of the 4th user. Something is telling me that the 4th user is a really huge link to why One For All is like it is right now, which is why All Might is wanting to do more investigation. He wants to figure out what's really going on there, because it's clear that All Might's not trying to protect Izaku from the darkness, for instance, like he told the deaths of the other users, but he never said anything about the 4th, so what's going on there? It has to either be something tied in with the quirk. If you know about the quirk, maybe something bad happens, or maybe he doesn't want to scare Izaku because of how the quirk is. Maybe it's something really bad, and Izaku might just straight up fear it and might run into some problems. There's so many questions, but I feel like that 4th user is definitely going to play a huge role in maybe even this outcome of this fight. Maybe that quirk might manifest itself to actually step up to either conclude this fight or make Shigaraki win. Who really knows? So Ochiko was teaching Izaku how to maneuver in midair, which I think this is a really beautiful chapter to kind of incorporate Ochiko's quirk and be able to show that Izaku was prepping himself for the day when he finally does get Float. It kind of explains why he's able to maneuver like he does throughout this chapter, why he's able to maneuver and pull Shigaraki towards him and then grab Shigaraki and just punch him real hard. It explains why Izaku's able to do this, is because he was training with Ochiko how to kind of balance himself and use air pressure to move himself, and also being able to actually use his Black Whip to grab, let's say, Shigaraki and pull himself forward. He's using momentum. He's using literally air pressure, but also momentum of Black Whip, the recoil effect, to be able to move around in the air, which shows a lot that training with Ochiko really helped him out. And I appreciate that. I appreciate, him actually having that little training session with Ochiko to actually learn how to maneuver with Float. It didn't come out of nowhere. People can't say, oh, he somehow is able to fly and he knows how to, maneuver in the air. This doesn't make any sense. I'm glad that was added in. It makes so much sense now when you see that. Let's talk about what I kind of said at the beginning of the video. Eri and, potentially a regenerative quirk. We gotta think about this for a second. What if what All Might said, why he kind of excluded that quirk, from whatever the 4th had and didn't talk too much about it, what if it was a regen quirk? What if, that quirk was a regen, and that's why he's concerned to tell Izaku, because if he tells Izaku, it resulted in him not caring about his body, kind of similar to what's going on with Shigaraki, and he would just damage himself beyond repair, even he knows he'll be healed. Maybe that is what, All Might is trying to hide, or it could be something else. But regardless, this gets into the point of Eri. We all know Eri is someone that's going to be very important in the future of this story. She's been built up for too long. We know that her quirk is incredibly powerful. We just don't really know exactly when is she going to be used. We know she will pop up one day, probably to stand before Shigaraki. The question is when. And most likely, if Izaku does damage himself beyond repair, it's possible that Eri might rewind the damage that Izaku has taken to be able to fight with it. I have a feeling something like that's going to happen. I could be wrong, but I feel like Eri is going to play a huge role in fixing whatever damage that Izaku receives in this chapter and the upcoming chapters. So yeah, that's pretty much about it, though. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe. If you like this video, please leave a like. And with that, Chibi out.